Hey, we're gonna learn some more chord tricks for jazz band. Last time we learned these three shapes. It's minor 7, 7, major 7. It's minor 6 thing that'll come in real handy in a second here. And all of these chords have the root on the E string, because that's the one we learned first. With bar chords and power chords, the next thing we would do would be to take those shapes, move them to the A string, right? And then with bar chords, there's a slight like shape difference because of that B string that gets in everyone's way. And we're going to do a similar thing with these shell chords. So if I'm going from a D minor 7 to a G7, I've got this D minor on the 10th fret. I've got this G7 on the 3rd fret, and they're really far apart. Like physically, it's a little tricky to get to. Also, every note moves a bunch, right? Like if you think of it as three singers, each one of them has got a big jump to get to their new note. So when we treat a chord like it's three singers, that we gotta come up with parts for, it's called voice leading, right? So what actually has to change? In this D minor chord, I've got a D, a C, and an F. No A right now, just a little shell chord. So which of those notes are wrong in a G7? Well, this D is just the 5th of a G chord, right? So there's no reason I have to get rid of that note. The C's out. There's no C in a G7. But I've got a B right there. And this F, the 3rd of D minor, is actually just like the 7th of a G7 chord. So if I only change what I have to, I go from this to this. And if we look at what the singers are doing, one of them is going, and the middle one, and the bottom one. That's the smallest possible movement we'd need, and we get to the new chord. Versus way easier, okay? So you gotta kind of squint to see the chord. This thing, you might have noticed, was our minor 6 from last time. It's also a good option for a G7. There's no G. There's a bass player. G's their job. It's fine. Gotta give him something to do. So the way it works is this note that I've kind of surrounded, right? The note that's on my A string right next to my E string is the root of the chord. If not playing the root gives you anxiety, you can just move your middle finger over. And there's your G, right? Or there's your root of the chord. Kind of looks like C7 cowboy chord a little bit. But you don't have to. You can leave it on the 5th. Okay? So let's take that chord and move it through our chord progression, right? So now, got a C major 7. And I'm going to jump up here to the 12th fret. So this would be my root, but I'm playing its 5th anyway. So I've got D minor, G7. So very little movement, right? Harder to think about, easier to play. I'll take that trade. You might not catch these if you're sight reading a chart, but they're so useful once you get used to finding them. And this particular one, D minor to G7, it's a 2/5. D minor is the second chord in C. G7 is the fifth chord in the key is C. It's a 2/5. And those are all over the place, right? So we've got a lot of use for these inversions. Or, you can just move your finger over a string. It's no longer an inversion. You got the root. I like the voice leading with the inversions a lot. So I can do that with the seventh chord, and it's this. I've got my other chords. I've got my minor 7. So like if this was my root, 1, 3, 7. I've got my fifth down here. Kind of looks like that minor 6th shape for the flat 6, but we're thinking about it as a D minor 7. Okay? Major 7. I've got this little shape. If you know this like major 9, just the bottom of that. So now I've got more options, right? So I'll do the like 5th on the E string for all of these. This will work just fine as a C major 7. It works just fine as a G6. Those chords they share 3/4 of the notes. So C major 7, A7 I could get here. Go to that inversion of D minor 7 to my G7. Maybe up to my C major 7. To my A7. D minor. G. C. Up to my A7. D minor. G7. So it gives you more options so you can have your rhythm part be a little more melodic, right? If you're playing a bunch of chords, there's a melody on top, whether you're paying attention to it or not, and this lets us play a nicer melody in our chord part. Thing to watch out for. If I want a D minor 7, this is fine. And last time when we were looking at our minor 7 flat 5 chords, don't worry about the 5, right? It's here if you need it, or it's back here if you need it. But if you just play the shell version, it's fine. With these voicings, this is the D minor 7. This is the 5. So you gotta yank it over if you have a flat 5. Which gets you that G, or that like A flat major 6 voicing as well. Like I said, we're playing 3/4 of the chord. So we're playing 3/4 of 2 different chords. And then if there's any ambiguity, the bass player is going to play the root. And then we'll all know what's happening. It's great. It's a great system. Yeah. The fact that a bunch of the 7th chords can be respelt as 6th chords goes the other way too. When you're looking at your part, sometimes it calls for a minor 6, sometimes it calls for just a 6th. That doesn't make a ton of sense right away. Like we use those chords less than the 7th chords, so we kind of short circuit a little bit. Well, on my parts, if I'm allowed to mark on them, I'll sometimes rewrite them, especially with the minor 6th chords. Like if a chord is a D minor 6. It's a B minor 7 flat 5. Same notes. And that one, for whatever reason, makes more sense to me. It just like hits my frontal lobe faster, whatever the thing is. So if I can call it that chord instead, life is easier. Yeah, there's a lot of times in these parts where they weren't notated by a guitar player. We have a grip, like a chord we jump to really quickly, that we know the name of, and they call it something else, because they're all written by piano players. And what are you going to do? Okay, so quick recap. For my inversions, the root is on the A string, but I'm not playing it, right? So like this shape works as a D minor 7. So if you know the roots on your A string, you use them to find these chords. You just don't have to play them. D minor 7, right? This shape, D7. It's a thing we used for A minor 6 last week. Also a D7. This thing I can call a a D major 7. I've got my 5th fret, 4th fret, 6th fret. It's also an A6. A6 and D major 7 share 3/4 of their notes, so it's fine. This lets us play chords that are closer together, chords that sound more continuous together. Also, if it's like the same 2 bars for the whole song, it lets us play different versions of the chords so we don't get bored. Because when we get bored, we stop paying attention. And when you stop paying attention, you make mistakes. So, fringe benefit, definitely helpful. Not getting bored. Thanks.